the scenes. Beyond this person who is looking at you on the screen, so calm and so relaxed, there is a cheeky someone inside there. So that is what happens behind the scenes. What we do, getting ourselves ready for the show, you have to psych yourself up. If you're not your own motivation, then who is? So that is what happens behind the scenes, whether it's on news, whether it's on Biashara Tuesday. So right about now, we're about to have a discussion on green financing, that is renewable energy and green hydrogen in Africa. How well do we finance this? All conversations around carbon credit and everything in between. And our guest is right here in studio with us, Titus Kip Korir, and we'll be having that discussion in a bit. All right, we are here on the lounge. And before I introduce my guest, everyone introduce themselves best. Titus, how are you this morning? So good to have you here this morning. It's quite a heavy traffic. We are so glad that you made it to KU Studios this morning. How was your journey traversing all those towns to KU?
Yeah, of course, the journey have been quite tough with the emissions of tear gas. But thank God I've made it well here at KUTV.
So how would you describe yourself, Titus? Based on what you do, who you are, how would you describe yourself?
So, my name is Titus, and I'm a renewable energy professional with vast experience in developing renewable energy projects in Kenya, and also I've done a lot of energy auditing, environmental impact assessment, and other of topics also renewable energy and green hydrogen in Africa, and another one in climate change and finance in Africa. Yes.
So before we get into you telling us what inspired you to write these books, when someone thinks about renewable energy, what comes to their mind is electric cars, using cooking, using gas instead of using firewood or charcoal. So what is there more to renewable energy that as a public we don't know?
So basically, what I can say is that renewable energy is basically harnessing energy from natural resources, and we have different types of renewable energy, and these scale up across from solar, wind, hydro, and even geothermal, being the best load renewable energy resource that we have in Kenya today. Yes.
All right, now back to the books. What inspired you to write these two books, and can you tell us more about the content in the books?
So basically, the book on renewable energy and green hydrogen. In Kenya today and even in Africa today, we are moving to having 100% transition in renewable energy. And the key element of having this renewable energy transition is because we have to reduce carbon emissions, and we have to go in line with the Paris Agreement, the Article 6, of ensuring that we limit the global the global emissions to be below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So this is a key priority to ensuring that all the leaders ensure that they have a clean, they understand first what is green energy and what are the opportunities of green energy in Kenya and Africa. Yes.
All right, so in the book, let's take an example, climate change and finance in Africa. how sustainable is this, especially now that we've had so many groups who are largely using energy, lacking information? Because, for example, in a rural setup, most of them may not be able to afford, using like we give an example of what is this? The one that they use biogas, yes, biogas, using biogas or using just general gas. Some of them may not be able to afford it. So how well can we integrate them into it? And when such happens, is it sustainable?
Yes, what I can say is that harnessing like the biogas for small scale farmers is sustainable because in the market today you can get these biogas plants very cheap with 50,000 Kenyan shillings. You can have a small biogas plant in your home, and that is quite sustainable so long as you meet the basic requirements. That is, you must have we for the past installation that we have done, so long as you have a minimum of 2 cows in your homestead, you can easily get these biogas plants. And it is sustainable since now you can use these biogas plants for cooking and even heating. We have had previous small-scale farmers using these biogas plants to even heat boilers, and these boilers are used to clean the milking equipment. So it's totally a clean energy transition for small-scale households.
And how well is relevant authorities like the Ministry of Energy or the government at large supporting such initiatives when it comes to financing?
What I can say is that the Ministry of Energy is supporting these programs, and I was part of the team who did the county energy plans for the 47 counties, which are being integrated in the national energy framework. And these county energy plans is from 2023 to 2030. And this every county is supposed to have a clean energy program for every citizens in the county. And this comes up along with having a strategy whereby they roll out the biogas for farmers in every county. And apart from that, because we are also having the electric, the EV vehicles, so in the county energy planning, so every county will have to roll out clean cooking access for every household in the county, and even EV vehicles, and try to reduce the carbon emission. Yes.
All right. Now, take us through the steps of how one can benefit from the financing, climate financing, whether it's from banks, whether it's from organization. How can someone be part of this financing?
So what I can say is that you need to be first to be in this space, and you have I encourage the youth to come up with startups in climate finance, in climate space, so that you get an opportunity to access this green financing. Because without a startup, without without a project, you can't access this green financing. So, for example, we have financing for green hydrogen. We have financing for renewable energy projects, and the reason is because every country in Africa strives to have a zero emission, and by having zero emission, every country has to roll out these programs and also have this climate finance. So without these startups, there is no opportunity to access this climate finance. Yes.
Is it possible to have zero emissions?
Yes, it's possible. Let's take a scenario for like the Kenya. In Kenya we have 98% renewable energy in the national when you see, when you find that we have a gap of 8%, and now if we invest in green hydrogen, that means we'll be able to offset around even 100,000 metric tons of carbon emission. And this means that there is also transition, like we know that the conventional way, the cars that we have in our country today, they emit a lot of carbon emission. So there is now a competition of having a hydrogen fuel cars, and have also the electric EV vehicles. And these, when, for example, an EV vehicle, when you are traveling from Nairobi to Kisumu, you will need 5,000 Kenyan shillings for the fuel. But no, not EV, but the normal
That uses fossil.
yes, the fossil fuel vehicles. But when you are using the EV, you can charge it at around, you can use 800 shillings to charge that 100 kilowatt EV vehicle, and you can travel from Nairobi to Kisumu. So you find that you reduce the cost of the fuel. That is first thing, and the second thing is that you offset the carbon emission. And the reason why we are transitioning to having green hydrogen is because that we find that factories like for cement, factories for steel, they use a lot of energy, and they have high carbon emission. So when we replace these factories with green hydrogen cells, even though there is a high production cost, this will offset around 7% of carbon emission every year. Yes.
All right. Now, if we look at the transport sector where we are using vehicles, what is the highest contributor of carbon emissions apart from the use of matatus? Because if we look at it really, it is very hard to like get rid of them on our roads because there is a lot of you've used matatus and you enter kind unaangalia dashboard and you're like, what is happening here? And then the emission is very high because also we've had situations where the study of areas around major highways having a lot of emissions or a lot of the gases that are harmful. So what are the major contributors to these emissions, and how well can we harness this or save this situation?
So what I can say is that there are key, there are many scenarios whereby there are many emitters. Like for example, basically oil and gas industry are the highest emitters in this space, and even that is why the Ministry of Energy is tried to eliminate the use of the
All right, so that is a challenge.
Yes.
Apart from the industries and the transport sector, is there any other sector that you think is not monitored and they are high contributors of carbon emissions?
For now, I think that because of the legal and institutional framework whereby the Ministry of Environment is trying to have a national carbon registry, which is under the draft 2023 of the National Climate Energy Climate Change Draft. So these legal and institutional framework and maybe the KFS, Kenya Forest Service being the overseer, is trying to at least have these the carbon markets being registered and local communities be benefiting 30 to 20 to 30%, the county governments benefiting, the national government. National government is only the identity, so it only registers the carbon trading, but the beneficiaries is project developers getting 30 to 40%, county government 20 to 30%, and also the local communities should benefit from the carbon trading.
All right. Now that we are on the conversation on carbon credits, there is this controversial theory that the world is not having diverse climate changes, and the idea of we are saving the planet or the climate, there is climate crisis is not something that is really, it's an idea of developing funds in terms of carbon credits. It's just an investment kind of thing. What's your idea about that?
Maybe I can say that idea is 50-50% because
Neither here nor there.
because we are seeing the climate change impacts. One is the issue of floods, the issue of drought, the issue of famine. Those are some of the impacts of climate change. And now, and there's a reason why we have this climate change finance. Is because these climate change finance are very important to tackle these issues of drought, famine, even water access. Because now, if we don't have, and you find that you see the reason why it's a regional issue is because it affects everyone. And the reason why we have this climate financing is because you may not know which country will affect next. Maybe it's Kenya next year where we have drought even for 5 years. And you see when you have drought, you spend a lot of money distributing food. There are deaths of livestock. There is a lot of impacts. So me, what I can say is that this issue of climate change, we should take it seriously.
All right. One may say that, yes, we want to take the issue of climate change seriously. And if we look at Africa, the number of factories we have are not so much compared to industrialized countries like United States, United Kingdom. Like our carbon emissions are little. That means we are contributing positively towards the environment. And if we look at the numbers where the number of trees that is being driven or planted yearly, it's increasing every year. We've had situations where there are tree donations, there are campaigns of managing the environment. Like every now and then, you'll hear children in school planting trees and all that. We have our forests diverse, so much of them. But one will ask, why is it that when it comes to terms and conditions of carbon credits, how it should be paid, the quantity that it should be paid, why is it determined by the Western people instead of us? It's like you're being told that you need to keep your house clean, but then the cost of you keeping your house clean, it's me who is going to determine that cost. So what do you think about this situation where we are the ones managing, or we are the ones told to produce less carbon emissions while they produce more carbon emissions, but then they're the ones to determine the terms and conditions of how these carbon credits are going to be working?
Yes, that is a very critical issue because now you find that the Western countries are the
you think there is imbalance there?
Yeah, there is imbalance because now the high emitters should pay us more, should pay our African countries more because now we are low emitters. Yes.
When Trump was getting into office, he promised that the oil wells will be once again opened, and the narrative of using electric cars, it's not something that it's going to be normal, or it's not something that they're going to be embracing. Like there's going to be a change from using electric, and that they're going to be embracing the use of fossil fuel for their transport. In some ways, this is something that fuels the economy. If we look like at countries like Libya, where they are oil producers, they are well developed, and the Middle East, where they're having, fossil fuel, they're using more of that. It's like they're controlling the economy. And now as Africans, we are moving away from that. We've had a case where we are having oil wells in Turkana, and we are moving away from that. So is it something that is, do you think this is something that is going to be keeping us on our feet in terms of economic empowerment and the narrative of green energy? It's not so much friendly to economic growth.
Yeah, for the oil wells in Turkana, I think it's quite important because despite the issue of emissions and the impacts of having oil fields, we still need those oil wells because right now we import a lot of oil, and I think at some point last year the Minister for Energy signed a G2G agreement, and you see the oil, the cost of fuel is rising in the country, and this is we need a sort of reduce the taxes and maybe export more. We need to fully utilize the oil wells in Turkana to make sure that we also become exporter of green. But what I know is that Kenya, we are still far from exporting oil, despite having oil wells in Turkana. Yes.
So is it not like a situation where we are preaching water but we are taking wine? Because in as much as there is need to embrace green energy, renewable energy, it is more profitable embracing fossil fuel.
That one now embracing fossil fuels depends on our capacity to harness what we have, and you find that maybe even with the LAPSET project, we had LAPSET project that will be directly from Turkana oil fields to the Lamu ports. That Lamu port now will be a hub for exporting this crude oil. You find that we have no capacity to refine crude oil in Mombasa. So we, even if we have the Turkana oil, we have to export it as crude oil, and
For it to come back
yeah, to come back.
refined.
So we still have some challenges, and there was issue of we had an oil refinery in Mombasa, but there has been issue with the capitation, and it has been on stall for the last I think 20 years. So we still have quite a challenge in the oil industry sector.
All right. So how do you see the green energy, the hydrogen, use of hydrogen fuel, or yeah, in the next 10 years, the future of it?
So what I can say is that it is quite important to have these green hydrogen projects. Kenya having one green hydrogen project in Naivasha, that is 1.7 megawatts. It's being it's an hybrid system because it's also solar. It's a solar farm integrated with the green hydrogen project, and with the development of green hydrogen fuels
right. And what role should the local community, the youths be playing in this transition?
So I think the local communities or the youths should be also in this space, try to get the market share in coming up with the startup technologies, how to integrate these AV vehicles. They come in assembly of the electric vehicles. Uh, the workforce for the green hydrogen industry. So maybe encourage youths to have more skills in the green hydrogen sector because in the 10 years ahead we'll be having more projects on the green hydrogen. Yes.
All right. From your years of experience in this field, what was the most exciting project that you had that inspired you to, like, and you decided that, what, this is the field I'm going to be part of for the longest?
So I've done quite a number of installation, ranging from biogas and I think for biogas I've done around 20, 20 biogas plants, 20 and more biogas plants for small scale households. Despite having some challenges in terms of efficiency, but they have embraced it. Also, same case to the C&I sector, that is the commercial and industrial solar sector. I've managed to install two 25 kilowatt systems for industrial scale, and I'm also part of the development in green hydrogen projects, water desalination, because we have one water desalination project in Kwale, and this project will be incorporated with the green hydrogen because basically we need the issue with green hydrogen is that we require a lot of energy and we require also water to it's basically electrolysis, whereby we have different types of hydrogen, that is a brown hydrogen, we have gray hydrogen, and we have yellow hydrogen. Yes.
All right. And in the industry, to ensure there is a smooth transition, what do you think should be done differently?
So I think the policy framework plays a key role, and we have the Kenya Green Hydrogen Strategy from 2023 to 2030, and I think that having this policy framework whereby you encourage investors, developers, and even the legal framework coming out to integrate well and giving a good environment to develop these projects. These will at least improve our economy and have more youths also joining the space in terms of the workforce. Yes.
All right. So do you have any advice, trade secrets, any, something that you can give to encourage someone who is a potential investor in the green economy?
So with the incentives in place with the policy framework, the Kenya Green Hydrogen Strategy, the Kenya Climate Change Act of the draft of 2023, and the carbon credits market, the financing, the integration, all integration of this. I'd like to encourage also investors and the workforce to come together and even the policy framework, the Ministry of Energy, because they are the key players also in this space because without a clear guidelines and policy framework, we cannot develop these projects. The reason why I'm saying is that you see a country like Namibia, they are now leading in Africa in developing the largest green hydrogen plant. And the reason is because the government is supporting with the France government. They have developed a 10 billion US dollars green hydrogen project in Namibia. And this is through the support of the government. So what I would like to say is that the government plays a key role in policy framework and encouraging investors to come and develop these hydrogen projects because they are key to our Vision 2030 in ensuring that we have zero emissions and we transition 100% to renewable energy.
All right.
Yes.
So you have two books. You've written two books, Climate Change and Finance in Africa, and also Renewable and Green Hydrogen in Africa. Why should we have these books?
Yeah, because first is to impact knowledge. You may find that many people just hear renewable energy, green hydrogen, but they don't know what is this. So
All right.
it's very important to know what is this green hydrogen, what is these renewable energies, and what are the opportunities as an investor, as a even a student. How do I get into this space? So I've provided incentives on how all the financing on climate change, the financing on the renewable energy, and how can we integrate, because we can integrate this also as an hybrid system, whereby we can combine a solar system, we can combine a diesel genset together to harness power. Like for example, in Marsabit, there's a time we visited Wajir County, and when we reached there, we were doing a site visit for a 5 megawatt solar plant. We found that they have a lot of issue when it comes to electricity, and in fact, they thought now we were going there to solve the electricity challenges they have. They really need, they have problems when it comes to electricity supply. And I think that is the reason the government set up one project in Garissa, that is the 40 megawatt solar project. And there was also existing solar hybrid system where you have a combination of solar system and a diesel genset. So there is a gap, and also when in Kenya we still have a deficit. In fact, South Africa is ahead of us when it comes to power generation. It's double. But even though much of their power harnessing it comes from coal, which is reverse on this issue of zero emission, but they still generate a lot of power. So in Kenya, we have an opportunity to generate even more than 10,000 megawatts of geothermal. So we still have a long way to go, and we encourage investors to come and come in this space and develop more projects in renewable energy.
All right. How can we get the books?
So the books are available
Where?
in Nuria store, and you
Nuria store.
yes,
All right.
yes. So you can make an order, or you can visit Nuria store. You'll get a copy.
All right. Nuria store.
Yeah.
Any last word for our viewers back at home?
So what I can say is that let's join hand together in making sure that our country becomes sustainable, reduce zero emissions, and ensuring that we all strive to having a clean energy environment, which is sustainable and environmentally friendly.
All right. Sustainable and environmentally friendly.
And as I finish, also there are four pillars when it comes to electrification. That is the digitalization, decentralization, decarbonization, and so there are three Ds. So we are trying to decentralize these renewable energies, and also with an aim of decarbonizing. We need to decarbonize. We move away from large emitting projects to a more sustainable projects. And finally, I've said decarbonization, decentralization, and I think that those two.
Decarbonization, decentralization.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today. It was very exciting. I hope the youths are going to be venturing into green economy, something that is given prominence even by you given priority by banks, by the government in terms of funding. Those youth funds that you're seeing, if you're having a green energy project or something that ventures into sustainable development in terms of producing renewable energy, trust you me, you'll be given priority. So try and get one and be part of transforming our environment, or be part of transforming climate or harnessing or managing climate change in Africa and in the world. So that has been on the launch discussion with the Titus Kip Korir Ngeno, who is the author and who is an author and renewable energy specialist. And the conversation was around renewable energy and green hydrogen in Africa. Thank you so much, Titus, for making time for us this morning. Coming up next is the discussion on the newspaper review. It is post-Sabasaba, so much to discuss on how this has affected our economy, how this has affected our social, political status as a country. So we'll be having that discussion shortly after the break.